United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, welcome everyone. We consider this our working meeting for Miami Township Board of Trustees, first Wednesday of the month. Can I get a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Reiniger?
Here.
Mr. Blanton?
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
First business on the agenda is to elect the president of the board. I will nominate Jack Reiniger for president of the board in 2023. I'll make that a motion.
I will second.
All right, Mr. Reiniger?
Abstain. I'll let these two guys vote. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Blanton?
Yes.
And Mr. Robinson?
Yes. You, go Katie.
Yeah, come on. You're in the middle.
You get a quarter extra an hour for.
Do you?
Yeah.
I thought
Not in
that
this
was-
budget.
I just thought it was to open the door.
Neighbor?
I know. I don't think we've ever sat
Never
next to
been
each
over
other.
here.
I've always
We
been
haven't.
stuck with the,
Got my tip here and I've finally made it from there down to here.
wow.
And that happened on the first vote.
Mike, you got a while.
Okay,
Next year.
first thing on the agenda was, salary schedule. We still have some issues with that. We're gonna go into executive session on that, then we'll come out and approve the final, there's 5 different scenarios, and we'll pick one, come out and tell you how we did it. I need a motion to approve the resolution 2023. The township has chosen not to procure a healthcare plan under the Ohio Revised Code 505.60. It's chosen instead to reimburse out-of-pocket premiums for insurance per audit, I'm sorry. I need a motion.
Go ahead, Mike.
Does that make sense? Yeah,
Oh, I'm
so if
sorry.
the trustee.
Nothing changes really, it's just
Right,
that
nothing's changed. but-
instead of the board getting an insurance plan, he should pay our premium, which is Medicare.
Right.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-01.
I will second that.
Mr. Blanton?
Yes.
Mr. Reiniger?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes. Need a motion to approve the appropriations and the revenue budget that Cindy presented and POs for 2023.
And that was, the finance committee
Right.
got all copies of those and,
Finance committee reviewed those, we've had meetings with the finance committee and with department heads. Need a motion to approve as presented.
Motion to approve.
So I'm clear, is that what we were talking about here, or this is?
No, that's salaries.
That's salaries. Cindy's budget, she submitted.
yeah, the appropriations and the revenue,
Gotcha.
all that goodies
That's
right there.
Yeah.
Mr. Reed, any comment that you have?
No, I mean,
Good.
Ms. Ozer and I discussed it at length, and, we're good.
And you as well, Censor?
Yeah, I
With
feel,
all of it?
yeah, I
Okay.
feel very good about it.
Great. I will second. Was there a motion made?
Yes, Dan did.
Danny made a motion.
Here.
Need
Alright.
approval to approve?
Let me
Hold
do
on,
the
let's
goods,
vote.
sorry,
Go
Joe.
ahead.
Mr. Blanton?
Yes.
Mr. Reiniger?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
And we need approval to, approve the bonds for those employees who are bonded, including the, trustees and the fiscal officer.
I'll make a motion that we do so.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Blanton?
Yes.
Mr. Reiniger?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
And we need a motion to approve the committees as presented on the attached. Basically the same committees we had last year.
I'll make a motion to approve the committees as written and as attached to our agenda.
I'm obviously going to not just second that based on my previous, comments and recommendations based from last meeting.
Okay, I'll second the motion.
Can we have discussion?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I think that, again, in light of communications that we've had from our our legal, advisor and, just in best practices and being consistent with, how other townships have operated that have an administrator, and again, we have an administrator. I brought this up 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago. And, so I was hoping to hear some feedback in between then and now. I really haven't heard much, so I don't know where everyone is on this, but I'd love to hear, any thoughts or comments, but I think that, to be consistent with where we are with the administrator, that we need to, disband, the committee structure, especially as it relates to oversight of specific departments within the township operation, and, that we need to streamline communication, and that all, departments should fall under Mr. Reed, our administrator.
What's your opinion of exactly what the job is of the trustee, Mike? Because you was elected by the people to do a job. And, at that time, we had these committees and everybody was responsible for certain areas. Like you're responsible up here, Dan's responsible for areas, I'm responsible for areas. So if you wanna turn this over, let Dan do all the research, and he presents you with his recommendation of what you should vote for, you're just gonna vote for that recommendation, right?
No, I'm going to do my own research and do my job.
Then what's wrong with you having that committee,
Well,
on any committee?
you-
The committee structure means that all of us are on all committees. The only thing is, you're head of certain committees, I'm a head of certain committees, and Danny's the head of certain committees.
Well,
So,
why would, so what is your,
my question is, what do you see your job is as a trustee? I mean,
well, it's laid out in the ORC and per the statutes of what our responsibilities are, and we, just like a board of directors at a company or a CEO, the board has a CEO that runs the day-to-day operation, and the board, gets input from that CEO, and they make educated decisions as far as setting the budget, as far as authorizing or making final decisions on personnel, basically giving direction as to how the township should run. That's in the description of working for a township trustee. And the difference between then and now, of when I was elected and when I started, is that we have an administrator. And so that changes things. So it is, you were saying when
well,
I.
the administrator position is still, right now, is still, I mean, he's on a year probation, so we don't even have that year up until May, so we don't even know if we have it after May. Sure we will, but we don't know what it's gonna look like in May, so I think it's something we might wanna look at later in the year if you want to, but, we have areas of responsibility, and because you, like you said last January, you have a full-time job, you can't be here. So I can be here, and I wanna take care of responsibilities that I was elected to take care of.
And that's very secondary to the reason why I made the point that we needed to hire an administrator. We needed to hire an administrator because we have grown to the size that we are. We're in cloud. We're one of the medium to larger size townships, and I believe that we need to operate as if we are one, and that this is the best way, in my opinion, and in most folks' opinions, of how we should be operating with how big we are.
So what I would like to say about it is we passed an organizational chart with the board of trustees at the top and the fiscal officer, Mr. Reed down below. And that's been established, pretty much our chain of command, just like the service and, other organizations. So I don't know what not allowing us to oversee these committees, along with Mr. Reed's help, that it deviates away. I would think it does not deviate away from the best interests of Wyoming Township. I guess in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say, I don't feel like it's a real big issue, since we do have an administrator that the department heads, we passed organizational chart, they should be going to Mr. Reed And they're allowed to come to us, but we want our main point of contact to be Mr. Reed and to run things through the board that way. I thought we talked about that openly in discussion when we passed that organizational chart. So
Recording in progress.
am I wrong on how
Fine, go ahead.
we're looking at things? Or am I off base here when I say that about the organizational chart?
I think you're pretty much on the money. My only contention is your position is a part-time position. And I think it was 25 to 28 hours for Dan Reed. And, a lot of times people don't necessarily wanna reach out to somebody they may not know. They wanna reach out to somebody they do know, somebody they may have voted for. And,
Well, we're not taking that away.
I know you're not taking that away, they can still reach out to you, but you're still putting the decision-making into somebody else's hand. And all you get, if I read it right, what you was presented before was that, he would review and make decisions, and then bring those decisions to us to approve or disapprove. Now, if you're gonna look the same paperwork that he's looking at, why have the double layer there? There's lots of things he can do, lots of things that need to be done. So you're running out of room at the cemetery, you got long response times, to calls out on Pickaway Galley area. There's lots of issues that can be looked at, rather than give up more control of what you do on your own, I think. So, I mean, we can talk about it all day, but, I'm not sure where it's gonna go. The motion's been made, I second the motion. I think we'll go.
I have more to say. If you, Mr. Reed, what is the administrators group that you're involved in, that you have monthly meetings?
Southwest Ohio Administrators Association.
Okay, so, and, the current president of that, or has been in the past year, is
Vicky Gerhardt.
and prior to that was Green Township Administrator Frank Birkenhour. So, I'm doing my homework. I think it's always important to do your homework and be prepared. So, in anticipation of this conversation, I reached out to Frank Birkenhour, who was the president when I reached out to him in December of the Southwest Ohio Township Administrators Network. And he sent me, some, information based on his, I think he has 20 years or more, experience being an administrator.
Did you make that available to us so we could review it? Was that made available to us?
No,
Okay.
this was information that I'm doing my research in preparation for this discussion. So we're not, this is an expenditure or anything else that we're voting on. This is me doing my homework and being prepared for this conversation. So, Mr. Birkenhour wrote, "You can't have accountability with your administrator if you continue to circumvent the chain of command. With the township administrator, trustees should generally work through the administrator to obtain action by staff. No individual trustee as one are able to direct staff. Coordinating through the administrator will make sure the issue is sent to the right staff person for action and will allow the manager to confirm and be responsible for a timely follow-up. In addition, when developing priorities for the board and department heads, it is nearly impossible to do so if they answer to three different masters. The result is no accountability and organizational chaos. The administrator is a neutral leader who looks at every request in terms of the organizational goals and approved it on its merits as it competes with other requests. When requests come through, they are fully vetted and presented to the board in a professional manner for them to make a decision. It typically results in efficiencies for both your budget and use of trustees' time as an elected official and their community. So if you have department heads going directly to trustees and they're advocating for the different expenditures and approving different things, then you already have influence from the board. And you continue to say that the administrator should be making decisions and that we're just gonna rubber stamp it. He's not making a decision. He's fully vetting it. He's looking at it on its merits and how it competes with other requests, bring it before the board, and then we do our homework and make an educated decision. I think that we've had communication issues, and I could cite those if you want, where there's been certain departments that weren't aware that other departments were, what they were doing because they were communicating directly with trustees and not communicating with the administrator, whereas if everyone's communicating with the administrator and answering to him or her, and the administrator is communicating with the entire board, then that cuts out the likelihood of that continuing to be an issue. So that is why I am proposing this. That is why, again, I know you don't like to hear it, but that's why Springfield and Anderson and Sycamore and Sims and Columbia and Greene and Delhi and Coleraine and the 99% of the townships in an urban county operate this way. And so that is why I am pushing for this. If the board chooses to go in a different direction, so be it, but I think that this is the best practice. I think that, again, I've done my homework, I've talked to the OTA, I've talked to the township administrators, and there are things that were addressed from our legal advisor that plays into this as well. I don't think that we should have trustees serving as on specific committees, as far as finance committee, as far as land use committee, as far as the beautification committee. I think that should be Mr. Reed as our administrator, and then again, reporting to the board for approving budgets, for approving requests, and that again, that's how it's done elsewhere, and there are good reasons for it, to cut down on liability and making sure that we're following the ORC, the statutes, and what we should be doing.
How many of those townships are full-time administrators? How many part-time? I mean, when we hired Mr. Reed thing in January, you said he couldn't be here, be available all the time because he had a full-time job. So that's why we did a part-time administrator. And I know 3 times in this, or 2 times in this past couple of weeks, I've asked Mr. Reed about bids, like the downstairs bid, another bid, and he said he didn't know nothing about it, didn't have any input into it. So, and that was your department. I mean, there's people in your department who didn't even follow the procedure you want us to follow. So I think it needs some time to look at. I think maybe in 3 and 4 or 5 months, when Mr. Reed becomes full-time or permanent, or decide we need a full-time administrator instead of part-time, because he can't be here through the day to respond to the people because the trustees have got full-time jobs. If he's at some meeting someplace else, and I don't care where it's at or what the purpose of it is. If initially, when January and February, when he pushed us through, it was to be here to answer to the people when we weren't here, when we weren't available. Now he's gonna be gone to all these meetings that you want him to go to. Who's gonna answer to the people then? Or are they gonna should wait till he gets back and then call him, make contact? I think we should have been a full-time position in the beginning, if that's how we're gonna go with it, but we didn't. But
So, a couple things, you've said, I think I'm up to 4 times that we hired him because we have full-time jobs, and I just said that that's not the primary reason why we hired him. We hired him because it's best practices, it's the size of the township that we're at, and where we should be. And you can continue to say it, but that's not the primary reason why I was, at least for me, why I was pushing for that hire. I told you folks, when I went up to the Ohio Township Association last January, every conversation I had started with, well, how do you guys do it there? I said, well, this is how we do it. And they said, well, but why how does your administrator fit in there? And I said, we don't have an administrator. And their jaw was on the ground. And they said, I don't know how A township your size with what you have and what you do does not have an administrator. I brought up the idea of hiring a full-time administrator, and the rest of the board was not comfortable with the salary that would come with that and bringing someone on at that level. So we compromised and put it out for a part-time administrator. So, I don't know why you continue to say that it's because I have a full-time job.
Wait,
It's
you
not
didn't make
right.
that comment back in January, February? We can go back and tape if you want, I certainly.
I'd love to take that, but here's the thing, I said the primary reason. I'm not saying, I didn't say that was a consideration. I said the primary reason was that we are trying to right-size and modernize
In your
and get in
opinion,
line.
in your opinion,
Correct.
okay.
In my opinion, that was the reason that I was pushing for this, is because I think that that's where we need to be. And every conversation I had with any township elected officials across the entire state of Ohio, everyone unanimously, not a single one, everyone reacted the exact same way and said, I cannot believe that a township your size, with your population, with what you have going on in all the departments, does not have an administrator. And so that's when I started to push.
Now, talk to trustees or to their administrator.
To all of them, to fiscal officers, to trustees, to administrators, to anyone that they were all elected, and most of them are trustees, because this year, there's 3 trustees, there's 1 fiscal officer and 1 administrator. So the vast majority of the folks that I dealt with were trustees. And they said, I can't believe you guys don't, at this level, at this day and age, with the size that you are, that you don't have an administrator.
All right, so we got
I think that's-
we got a pending motion.
There's a motion on the table. You seconded, I seconded.
I made the motion to approve. Jack, Mr. Reiniger seconded, correct?
Yeah.
All right.
So if we're gonna continue to keep the committees, we're also gonna keep the same committees, is that?
Yeah.
That was listed on the back page.
Yeah, I'm just asking if that's the motion, is not only to continue to have committees and oversight of the departments, regardless of what I just shared, and that we're keeping the exact same committees.
Correct.
You want me to go with the vote?
Yep.
Mr. Blanton?
Yes.
Mr. Reiniger?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
No.
Okay, approved legal counsel for Ross Brown Todd. Any motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
All right, Mr. Blanton?
Yes.
Mr. Reiniger?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Okay, and, public, anything from the public?
I just have one question. What is the committees that you have and who's on?
Right now?
No, I'm talking to Mike. What are the committees, who are the personnel that are on your committees? Who right now respond to you? Just out of curiosity.
Sure, we can give you a copy of.
I don't need a copy.
Well, that will.
Is it like 20 people, 30 people? I work for a major corporation.
Sure.
And they started a lot of the stuff, and all they've done is push people out of the company. And they've left. Cause we had committees that work with the companies, and they decided that the higher ups were gonna do everything. Well, now I don't see this situation. So my question is, how many people can call our administrator? And I understand, because we're still a small place.
We're a medium, so we're.
Well, we're
upper
medium, but how many calls can he receive in a day and respond? How much information can he get?
I mean, it's gonna vary from day to day, it's just
Right.
like anything where you put.
All I see is the committees as informational, and hopefully they're doing it, and hopefully the trustees are sending it to the administrator and giving it. I've seen a lot of communication problems, period. You know, I just started attending.
That's what I'm trying to fix, is
Right.
to have everything
But
streamlined.
it just
That's what I
seems
just
like
read.
you know, he's trying to do his job, understand.
I'm trying to learn.
He's new. He's just learning the township. So hopefully, the trustees communicate from the population. Because usually you only get that when people complain. So hopefully they're ahead of it, and these guys know the population better than I do. I mean, I know friends and I've heard some things, and I try to communicate that, but that's the whole thing. Hopefully, having the committees only gets information, and hopefully that's what the trustees as well, with you guys. Then they hand it over to Dan, and then Dan is able to make decisions. And hopefully, that's the way the committees work. I don't know if Dan sees that or not. But the more information you can get from the public to help you out, the better off. Dan's job's easier, people understand what's going on. So hopefully that's the way the committees are working. Like I said, we had them at my historic Kroger's, then the guys at top decided to take off, and I just saw attrition going the last 2 or 3 years. So hopefully that's the way the committees work, that they give you the information. Is that the way it works, guys?
I think pretty much, that's why we hire an administrator, so.
And I know,
What
and
he's talking about and what we're talking about is, there's just a fine line in between that, and I honestly didn't think it would be this big of a deal. So, we still have.
well, I understand where he's coming from. Believe me, like I said, I worked for a major corporation for 46 years and saw what the different
But
things
we
they
pass
did.
our organizational chart and our chain of command
Right.
that we want our department heads to follow, and that's one of the reasons we have it.
Yeah, so hopefully,
But they can still go to him, and if they have a rumpy problem, then he can go to the rumpy, then trustee, they don't have to go to all three of you and say, Dan, I'm talking about Dan.
Correct.
I mean,
so hopefully it's working together.
right.
That's.
We're gonna have to.
So if Dan has a question, who's he gonna go to? Just ask any of the trustees any question? on
Well,
anything?
he has don't you have county, things that you can go and say, hey, this is going on, what are you guys doing?
Well, the way, I guess there's confusion here maybe a little bit on how the so it's broken down into these committees as responsibilities. So if I have a question, for example, about the fire department that Chief Lacy brings to me, I go, because it's his committee, to Mr. Renninger, ask him the question, which happened twice this week, where I went to him on a fire issue. That is and if I have an IT question that Mike Taylor brings up, I go to Mr. Robinson. If I have a senior center question, I go to Mr. Blanton. That's how that's how it works currently. As far as standing committees, as far as I know, we only have 2 with the public, and that's our finance committee and our land use committee, and we do have a beautification committee, but that's more, they make decisions on flowers and things like that. So those are the only 3 quote unquote committees that I know exist at this time, and the board can obviously correct me if I'm wrong. And as you said, I've been in the township a long time, but I've only been in this position for
Believe me,
7 months.
I've seen my managers at my store, they come in, they're given directives, they don't work, because depends on the personnel stood, where you are.
But these are areas of responsibility that you are correct in that, I can go to one of the trustees rather than to any other one. I go to that individual based on this committee structure.
And his Danny's job is a work in progress, we just started this.
Well, I know,
And
believe
you
me.
know, and maybe by the end of this year, he'll be full-time, who knows? I mean, he might do exactly what Mr. Robinson said.
So do you
He might
feel-
get that position.
Dan, do you feel that the information you're getting from the trustees is good or bad?
It's good.
Okay.
And a lot of times, you have to understand, a lot of times it's advice that I'm asking of an individual trustee, because if I ask more than one, then it becomes a vote, and then it becomes a problem.
Right.
Right.
If I get advice from that trustee on some direction to take on some decision to be made. If a decision is to be made, then I bring it to the full board, and then the full board
Right,
makes
I
the
understand.
decision.
My goal was to cut down on miscommunication and problems, and to, again, streamline it, so that if everything goes through one funnel, you're going, information is coming in and out and in and out, and so that point of contact. And we have had department heads over the last 6 months since Mr. Reed was hired, who have said, I'm not sure if I report to the trustee or if I report to the administrator. And I've heard that more than once, and I'm trying to empower Mr. Reed. I'm trying to clarify for our department heads so that they understand who they report to and how this all works. And so by adopting a structure that, again, every other township that I just mentioned before, a dozen or so townships, all handle it exactly that way, that I think that we could make it to make it fair for the department heads so that they understand, make it fair for our administrator so that he understands, just cut down on a lot of this communication problems, and have it flow much more seamlessly than it's been over the last 6 months. So that was my goal.
Yeah, well, I think you can just direct it anyway. I think that's the thing, is you just tell the department, if you got something going on, make sure you contact the administrator first.
It's,
But the committees help out as far as communication, believe me. Work for a major corporation, I've seen this. And unfortunately, we try to implement policies from these guys, and they can't figure out that your employees are probably the most important part. Your servants are the most important part.
sure.
So hopefully, that's what you just tell the committee, you tell your department heads, hey. And I think you two can do the same thing. Go to Dan first, if you have any other problems. Dan can come to you guys, and they have the experience, I don't have the experience. I'm sure you've got experience that.
Well, we got one department head here right now, I'm sure he knows what he's supposed to do. We can check with Ronnie and the other department heads and see where the confusion is at.
Right, and then just tell them, hey.
Because we did put out an organizational chart, and the organizational chart did all run in to Mr. Reed. And Mr. Reed is underneath the trustee.
So the department heads have to just know that. They're there, if you got any other questions, I'm willing to do the research for you and help each other out. That's all I gotta say.
Okay.
I don't mind getting chewed out for what I do. I'm not gonna get chewed out for what somebody else says, and we should vote.
Oh, I understand. I'm just saying that the department heads just have to know that he's the administrator, make sure you go to him. And then, you guys are very valuable. You guys have that history and knowledge.
That's being taken care of, it is,
And that's the important part.
I assure you of that.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have
Anything
one
from
question.
public?
When you use the term department head, how many department